Hello and welcome to my live interview today for the Victorious Souls podcast. Today, I have with me a gentleman named Dan Clouser. He is an author, he is a blogger, a speaker, a consultant, a podcast host, and also he not only founded a nonprofit, but he ran it for 30 years, successfully serving youth. Before he sold his home and stuff and took to traveling on the road with his wife in an RV full time. So we're going to hear his story of how he got into all of that and then what made him leave all that success to go and travel around the country in an RV. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Welcome with me today, my guest, Dan Clouser.
Hey, how you doing, Danielle?
I'm really well. How are you, Dan?
Great.
I can't wait to get into this story about how you do all the things. You know, you're author, a blogger, a speaker, a consultant, you know, all the things. And then you ran this nonprofit for 30 years successfully. And then suddenly you're living in an RV. So we want to get into all of that and hear how you came to doing that. But tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up. You were raised by a hippie. Not everyone knows what a hippie is. So maybe you need to unpack what a hippie is. I understand what a hippie is, but not everyone probably knows what that is.
No, I think there's probably a lot of different definitions for hippie, but in my mind, it's definitely someone who's just a free spirit, kind of lives life by their terms, is willing to do whatever it takes to just be happy and live life to the fullest. She was she was a lover of music and just a lover of people and a lover of life and really did live life to the fullest. So that's kind of my definition of a hippie, is somebody who's just out there doing their things and living life on their terms.
So what was your childhood like growing up with a hippie mom?
It was very interesting. My mom and dad got divorced when I was in fourth grade, midway through fourth grade, and I moved to Florida with my mom, and became what was the baby of the family to an only child pretty quickly. My brother was already in the Army when my mom and dad got divorced, and my sister went to Florida with us for a little bit, but then moved back to Pennsylvania with my mom. So it was just me and my mom for, the next 4 years of my life. And, seeing the things that she did just to make sure that I had a good childhood. At the time, I didn't, I don't know if I want to say appreciate it, but I don't think appreciate it fully, what I do now. She worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs, just to make sure that I had, everything that I needed growing up. She would take me to the department store to go clothes shopping, and then she would go to the Goodwill or the thrift shop to get her clothes, just to make sure that, I was getting what I needed at that time. Wow. And, so we were pretty poor growing up, but I don't know that I ever really realized it. And even with everything that she was doing, the multiple jobs and all the stuff that she was doing to keep our heads above water, she somehow was able to make it to like every single, Little League game, sporting event that I had. And again, as I look back and reflect on it now, like I just have no idea how she did it all. But she did, and she did it, with no complaints, and taught me a lot about life. And then I started heading down the wrong path as I through middle school, and at the end of 8th grade, she decided it was time for me to head back to Pennsylvania and live with my father for a little bit at that point. And that was I know that was a very tough decision for her. It was one that I certainly didn't respect at the time. So we we didn't see eye to eye on that decision, but it's honestly probably a decision that ended up saving my life. Wow. So it was all said and done. And you know, it it was really her way of exercising tough love. You
Wow.
know, so I know it was not an easy decision for her, but that decision also allowed her to, as I got older and I was still living with my dad. Now she was, you know, on her own.
Mhm.
She decided in her mid 40s to, you know, quit a really good paying job, and she took an old 1967 Plymouth Valiant, took the back seat out of it, put a mattress in there and a sheet of plywood to make a makeshift bed, and just traveled the country, you know, reconnecting with friends and family, meeting new friends and family, and just you know, again, living life to the fullest. And you know, she would stop, she'd volunteer if she got short on money. She would stop and work for a little bit, and she did that for, you know, several years before she ended up, you know, settling down again to an extent. She never really did settle down, but she stopped traveling full time. She graduated from the 67 Plymouth Valiant to an old Toyota camper. She went back to school in her late 40s, early 50s, to become a drug and alcohol counselor. She kind of redefined herself. She ran a halfway house in Florida, for women who are, you know, coming out of addiction, trying to reenter society. Um, and you know, she did a lot of incredible things. She volunteered at Ground Zero after 9/11. So like this time of year is, you know, being the day after September
Yeah.
11th that we're doing this recording, is the time where I really reflect back on her memory and, you know, what she had done in her, you know, with her life. And she was just an amazing woman. She's absolutely amazing. And again, when I sit back now that I'm older and she's not with us anymore, you know, I do wonder how she did it all when it was just her and I for those 4 years, that we'd lived in Florida. I don't know how she did it. Um, she did it with dignity and grace, and just, again, you know, made sure that I was taken care of, if that meant, you know, her not necessarily being taken care of.
Wow. Wow. That is quite a legacy for her to do that. That's a lot, because so many kids grow up with parents that don't do what your mom did for you. And
Yeah.
she had the hardship added to giving that much of herself to raise her son. So I really commend her. My mom did a lot of really hard things to raise me and my brothers also. We lost my dad. And so I look back, I don't know how she did what she did either. But
Yeah.
it is very commendable, and people, they'll just get it done. They'll nose to the grindstone and get it done. We can, if we will have a warrior spirit, a warrior mentality, we can accomplish phenomenal things. So,
We
what?
figure it out. We figure it out.
Yeah, well, you did another phenomenal thing, which I mentioned briefly, but they didn't hear how young you were when you did it. You were only 20 years old when you started your nonprofit. What motivated you to start the nonprofit? Tell us a little bit about that nonprofit.
So yeah, the nonprofit that I'd started, it was originally called Berkshire Baseball and Softball. We later rebranded, about 20 years later, to Big Vision Foundation. You know, but what's funny is, and again, I sit back and reflect, and as I meet some people now who are in their 20s, I think it gives me an appreciation more for what I did you know, at that time. But you know, I'd like to say that I had this grand vision, when I started it, that it would, you know, last forever and do this, you know, amazing work. But that really wasn't the case. Initially, it was started honestly just to give, me an opportunity to continue to play baseball a little bit. It was started as an adult baseball organization,
Mm,
and then morphed about 10 years later into a youth baseball and softball organization. As a lot of us had, you know, gotten older, we started getting into coaching, and we found ourselves still playing with each other on the same team, but then coaching against each other, um, with different teams that we were coaching. And it got to a point where we, you know, all kind of coached by the same philosophy and the same mentality of, teaching life lessons through the game, more so than just a win at all cost, even though every time we stepped on the field, we were playing to win, but that wasn't necessarily the ultimate goal. So we decided to bring youth programs under the Berkshire umbrella about 10 years into the organization. And that's when things really took off. And we understood that it was a lot more than just about baseball, that it was really teaching kids life lessons and leadership skills through the game. And, so we all shared the same coaching philosophy. So to be able to bring it together under one umbrella and really make an impact is something that was very special. But, I wish I could say that I had the foresight at 20 years old that, it was going to turn into this, this big thing that it did. But that really wasn't the case. I just kind of, went with the flow, and it morphed into, to what it was. And it was pretty special. We impacted a lot of kids' lives, who are still out there impacting the world today. It was kind of that ripple effect. And I don't want to get too far ahead, but one of the beauties of what my wife and I do now is being able to reconnect with a lot of those players all over the country and seeing what they're doing and seeing that we had planted now blossom. Because a lot of times as a coach or a youth sports administrator, you hear a lot of negative from parents, and it's a thankless job. So to be able to see the fruits of your labor, after all these years is pretty special. And in a lot of ways, I think it was, it's God's way of saying to me, you know what, you did a good job. And it's now time to concentrate on this next chapter that you're in.
Wow. Yeah, that's 20 is pretty young. Was mentioned to me, I got married really young, and I had kids right away, which wasn't the plan, but I just learned the other day that a person's prefrontal cortex isn't mature till they're 25. So you started that when you didn't even have a whole brain. I had someone tell me the other day, they said, yeah, it wasn't even fair. You didn't even have a whole brain. So you started this nonprofit when, according to some definitions, you didn't even have a whole brain. So be kind to yourself. Maybe you didn't do it for all the perfect reasons. What 20-year-old does anything for all the perfect reasons? But in there also, you got married and you have kids and stuff too, don't you?
Yeah. So, I actually became a parent myself at 16 years old. Again, another thing that I seem to be way ahead of the learning curve with. I then, that same year, when I started the nonprofit, I'd started dating a woman who was 11 years older than me and had 3 kids of her own, recently divorced. And again, against all odds, no one would think that, a relationship like that would work. And again, I can't honestly say I was going into that relationship initially thinking that it would last a lifetime, but it certainly has. And we raised this, mixed family. We don't have any kids of our own, together. They're, hers and mine. But another thing my mom had taught me, because her parents were divorced and went on to have other families. So my mom had 3, full blood brothers, and then, another 4 half brothers and sisters from her mom's side, and another 3 from her dad's side. But my mom never referred to any of her brothers as brothers and sisters, as half brothers or, step brothers or none of that stuff. It was all, these are my brothers. So that was one of the things that really helped me become a step parent. And again, it was a conversation with my mother, who could be, again, very point blank and very much, there was never a lot of gray area with my mom. So when I first started dating my wife and we were having a conversation, she made it very clear. She's like, this is a package deal. Sandy's got 3 kids and you don't have a choice in this. You're taking Sandy and you're taking her 3 kids and you're going to treat them like your own, or you're not going to do this. And I took that to heart. So I never really, treated her kids any different than my own. They were all my kids. And again, that was, a very matter-of-fact conversation that that I had with my mom in the early days of dating my now wife.
Wow, that's awesome. Your mom sounds wonderful, which I can see why you call your podcast and your book what you do, which we'll get into a little bit more because she just keeps coming up. That's so much a part of who you are, which is an enormous gift that you have. Many people don't have that gift. That is such a precious gift that you have with her.
It is.
But in that time with your nonprofit, everything was going along well. It was successful. Like you said, it really blossomed after you brought the youth aspect into it, but then suddenly something changed and you didn't want to keep doing that. What happened there?
So in 2019, I took 2 solo trips by car. From one was from Pennsylvania to Texas, and then went through Louisiana to go back to Texas to connect with some friends that we'd done some work with. And a few months later, I did the same thing, took a trip from Pennsylvania to Orlando, Florida, and back. And both those trips, it was really the first time in my life that I actually took the time and enjoyed the journey. I stopped to see one of my old players in Atlanta when I went to Orlando. I connected with some friends in Dallas when I was in Dallas. And then again, went to Louisiana to connect with some friends. And, as an organization, we did a lot of travel, but it was always very regimented, so it was very strict. We had to be, at the restaurant for the kids to eat breakfast at 8:30 in the morning. We had, an hour to get them in and out of there and back on the bus so we could get to the complex by a certain time.
There's no enjoying the journey there. That's not road tripping. That's just getting there.
Counting kids, making sure we didn't leave a kid at the truck stop or at the restaurant or whatever the case is. And, so there was kind of this aha moment while I was, doing this where I was like, man, I think I've actually figured out why mom did what she did. Because she was not when she did her traveling, she did not use interstates. I mean, it was always secondary, US Highway 66 or something like that. She was not one to do interstates because she wanted to enjoy the journey. So there's kind of this aha moment, like, man, I think I figured out why mom did this. And then when I got home, I was in the process of adding 10 chapters to my first book. Well, I didn't know how many chapters at that time, but I was in the process of adding chapters to my first book. But with the amount of work I was doing and the amount of time I was putting in with the organization, it was tough to sit down and write. You're an author as well. That, if you're working 80, 90 hours a week, it's tough to carve out, even an hour a night to sit down and write a book. And when I got back from those 2 trips, man, I wrote like I hadn't written in years. And there was, again, this aha moment of, hearing a voice, hearing God's voice say, it's time for a new chapter. You've done your work here. It's time to open a new chapter. And I got to be honest with you, I was not receptive to this idea initially. And it took a while, for me to kind of buy into this concept of literally leaving work that I had done for, at that point in my life, 60% of my life I had spent dedicated to this nonprofit organization, and we were doing incredible work. So, wasn't a fan of this idea. But the writing is kind of what put me over the edge, like, having this newfound inspiration to be able to write more. So once I bought in, then I now had to convince my wife. So, I ran the idea by her. I'm like, hey, what would you think if we, sold everything, bought an RV and, did what mom did? And she thought I was completely out of my mind at first. We would, continue to kind of have conversations, and she had some stuff going on in her career where some doors that we were thinking were going to be opened were continuously not opening for her. And, we would have conversations. Well, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. Maybe there's a reason this door is not opening. Maybe it's because, we got another door that we need to go through. And then one day she came home from work after another, disappointing conversation with her supervisor.
Mm.
And she said, you know what? I'm in. Let's do it. And at that point, we kind of put the plan in motion. I'd let my board of directors know that 2019 would be my last year with the organization. And, we just kind of put it in place. And in January of 2020, we put our house on the market. In March of 2020, we took our house off the market
Gee, what
because of
happened in
COVID.
March 2020? Was there like a global pandemic or something?
And also in March of 2020, we bought our RV literally the day that the governor of Pennsylvania was issuing the shutdown orders, where we were just having conversations with our real estate agent about taking the house off the market because we didn't want it to look stale and be an old listing. And, we're sitting there and, shutdown orders are being issued. But even with all the uncertainty and kind of fear that surrounded that, there's this incredible sense of peace that we were making the right decision. So went ahead and bought the RV, and then we went and when the market opened back up in June, we ended up having 4 showings in the house and an agreement in place. And in August of 2020, we hit the road and have no regrets at this point.
Wow. If I remember correctly, too, I read in either your profile or in our talk prior to this that you had never driven an RV before then either, had you?
No, first day I ever drove an RV was the day I drove it off the dealership lot.
That's pretty incredible to do that. That's a big step. So what was through that transition time, what was the easiest part of it? And what was the hardest part of it? Was the hardest part letting go of the familiarity?
I think that was probably the hardest part for sure. A lot of people asked if, downsizing and selling all of our stuff was the hardest part. But that really wasn't. It was actually kind of liberating to get rid of some of the stuff that we had sitting around. I mean, I had a man cave that had all kinds of, baseball memorabilia in it and stuff like that. And I thought that I would have some issues getting rid of that stuff, but I really didn't. Again, it felt very liberating. My vinyl album collection and stuff like that. But I think the most difficult part was just, trusting the process and, continuing to kind of have, faith over fear that we were doing the right thing and making the right decision. But all in all, like I said before, I mean, we really have no regrets on the decision that we made.
And all your kids, your blended family kids, where are they around the country, and how were they on board with this? Did they think you guys were nutcases? Were they excited about it? What kind of happened there?
It was a mixed bag. We had them all over for a picnic because we wanted to make sure we told them all at the same time. We didn't want somebody to hear through the grapevine or anything like that. And, it was, some of them thought it was a really cool idea. Some of them thought that we had, lost our minds. It didn't take them too long to adapt because by the end of that day, by the end of our little picnic, they were walking around the house saying, "Hey, can I have that when you guys leave?" That we have that. So it didn't take them a whole lot to, to adjust, but they're all still in Pennsylvania, relatively close to each other within an hour of each other.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
we spent the majority of this past summer back in Pennsylvania before heading out here to Wisconsin to do this volunteer project that we're on now. But so it was nice being able to spend some more time with them as well. We hope that someday they'll hop in a car and meet us somewhere to at a campground or something, spend some time with us while on the road. We think that would be very special. I mean, some of our other full-time RV friends, their kids will come and visit them somewhere, their grandkids will come and visit them, and they tell us about how special that is for to be able to meet up with them on the road. So we're looking forward to that day as well.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have grandkids too, or not yet?
We do. We have 8. Yeah.
Wow, 8 grandkids. Wow. That's a lot. That's exciting. You got to spend time with them this summer then also.
We
Oh,
did. We had two graduations, two high school graduations, another high school graduation next year, and yeah, it's fun being able to spend time with them. And we've got one who is considering, and I think he's pretty close to making the decision of skipping his first year of taking a gap year to
mhm.
travel around the country in a makeshift RV as well. He's taking a Jeep and converting it to a nice area where you can sleep in the back and stuff like that. So there's so much to learn by traveling that we really encouraged him to make that decision as opposed to jumping right into college and going into debt and you know doing all the things that society tells us we should do
Yeah,
right out
going
of
on
high school.
autopilot instead of, kind of like just at least shake it up to make sure that you're doing it with intention instead of this is how we do it.
Volunteering at right now. It's called the Raptor Education Group in Inigo, Wisconsin, and he is a lover of birds. And we told him, look, if you want to spend some time volunteering at Reggie, I'm sure we can talk to Marge and have her hook you up for a little bit, and you would learn more than you would ever learn in a classroom by coming out here and meeting new people and doing new things.
So with these volunteer things that you do, you work at them, do they feed you there? Is there any kind of a way that you both support one another through the process? Or because you said it's volunteer, so it's not paid, right? So
Yeah, and each project is a little different. We've a little over a year ago, we did our first project, and it was actually here at Reggie, but it's through an organization called A Year to Volunteer. So
ah,
we've done projects with them in Arizona and Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and now twice here in Inigo. And like I said, each one is a little different. Sometimes we're in an area where we don't have to pay for a campsite, where that's taken care of. When we were in Louisiana, we were doing some hurricane relief effort there at a state park that hadn't been open since 2020 when Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta went through. So the community had really appreciated the work that we were doing and brought in a lot of meals for us during that project. So again, it's all different. Where we're at now, like we're paying for our campsite, but it's very low cost. So they're all different. Some you get the campsite, some you pay for the campsite, some you're going to get some meals, some you're not. But none of that really matters for us. We're
right.
just here
It
to.
was interesting to get these details in case who's listening, our listeners, if they're intrigued and like, hey, maybe I'm on to do that. How's that work? So the name of that organization was A Year to Volunteer.
Yep, A Year to Volunteer.
Okay,
Yep.
so listeners, if you are interested, intrigued by this, Google that, A Year to Volunteer, and maybe this is something you want to do for a year or maybe even longer.
Yeah. And what's great for me, being a guy who came from an organization where I was the guy doing all the logistics and all the planning, is here, man, we just got to show up and they tell us what to do.
You got the
and
easy job.
we go out and do it. It's like, give me a hammer, give me a screw gun, whatever. And I don't have to worry about the background logistics. We're just doing the grunt work.
Oh, that's cool. Is it anything you could compare it to like Habitat for Humanity at all? Or
Yeah. Yeah. And Habitat actually has a program for RVers as well. We haven't done it yet, but they do have an RV component to Habitat for Humanity. And it's amazing. I mean, the number of opportunities out there for full-time RVing, whether it's volunteer or, paid work, you can camp host, where places will allow you to come in and they'll take care of their site and they'll actually pay you a wage as well. Again, the people who run A Year to Volunteer organization actually run an app called campergigs.com, which lists, throughout the country, other, camp hosting gigs. And again, they're mixtures from full volunteer to paid to just having your site. So there's so many ways that you don't have to worry about generating revenue while
Mm.
you're, everybody thinks if you're going to full-time RV that you have to have this, massive trust fund sitting to the side. And I can assure you that is not the case, because we do not have that. So there are so many ways that you can do this and, make it work financially without having a boatload of cash in the bank.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm just reminded of your mom and how she head out to do her traveling, but she first made sure that you were taken care of. She didn't just
Yeah.
load you in a car and start driving around the country like that either. She made sure that you were taken care of, because sometimes people can get a little impulsive with things
Yeah.
and not think through. So it'd be important to think through the details, right? And maybe connect with someone like you, someone you're thinking about doing this, reach out to Dan and see what you can learn. Just see if that's a good fit, a not good fit, what's good for you. So
Absolutely. I would
Dan,
welcome the questions.
your podcast and one of your books is called The Journey of My Mother's Son. And listening to you today, I hear a little bit of why, but I'd like you to unpack, why did you use that terminology, the journey of my mother's son, in your book and for your podcast?
Um, really, again, it was just to honor her legacy, everything that she had done. Um, and, again, when I was younger, I mean, even if we would have this conversation in 2018, I loved telling my mom's story and telling people about, how she took off in a 67 Plymouth Valiant and traveled the country and, did her own thing. But never in my wildest dreams did I think that her story, that my story would reflect her story the way it has. And I remember having a conversation with my one uncle. I don't even remember what we were talking about initially, but something came up, and I had mentioned to him, I said, well, I guess there's no disputing that I'm my mother's son. And not a bad thing either. So,
No,
don't worry about that.
not at
So
all.
when we decided that we were going to do this full time, and, after my mom had passed away, I just remember people coming up to me that we had never met at her memorial service, talking about the impact that she had on their lives. And then getting letters from people that she volunteered with at Ground Zero or at a hurricane relief project in Florida, or whatever the case was, talking about, again, the impact that she had on their life, throughout, 3 or 4 month volunteer project. When she was at Ground Zero, she was there for like 4 or 5 months, I want to say. And, the
Wow.
hurricane projects that she would do, she'd be there for, 2-3 weeks, a month at a time. And, so we got all these, letters from people just telling us this. And when Sandy and I started talking about doing it full time, I said, how cool would have it been for Mom to be able to do this, during the age of social media and share these experiences in real time, as opposed to after she passed away, reading through her journals and, kind of, meeting some of these people, you know, in our minds,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to face. We're like, it would have really been cool for Mom to be able to tell those stories in real time. And that's why I'd done a podcast for the organization since 2012. And I really enjoyed the process of sitting down and having conversations with people and sharing those stories. So as soon as we made the decision, I talked to my producer at the time, because at that point, I did a podcast simply by doing an interview in front of the microphone, and that was it. I had no idea how it got to the internet, any of that sort of stuff. I walked into a studio, had a conversation with somebody, left, and a week later, we have a link that it's on Spotify. So I had no idea how any of the background worked. So my producer of the show that we did for the nonprofit and another friend of mine, Justin Shank, walked me through the whole back end of how you do it and get it up there. So telling stories of the people that we meet was part of what I wanted to do on this journey. We've been able to, I've been able to have podcasts with fellow volunteers that we've met, who just have incredible stories, hearing, as to what made them want to go full time, or why they will take a month off, because not everybody that volunteers through a year to volunteer is a full-time RVer. A lot of them live in a house, but they'll take 2 weeks and go volunteer and go back, as opposed to go on vacation. So I love hearing stories as to, you live in a house. Why would you want to, drive 5 hours and go volunteer somewhere for 2 weeks and then drive back to your house? So
So
I
the
love
year to
hearing.
volunteer, they don't have to volunteer for a whole year.
No,
Oh,
the name of the organization came from when Phil and Shar Roos, who started the organization, their plan was that they would want to volunteer in all 50 states for a year. Well, again, not really doing the math, they realized, well, this is going to end up being much more than a year process. So they stuck with the name. But no, a lot of people, they'll come in and they'll volunteer for, one project or a handful of projects or whatever works for them. So, so I love telling those stories. And again, it just kind of made sense that the title of the new podcast would be The Journey of My Mother's Son. And the most recent book that came out by the same title, Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1, is really a collection of thoughts that I had leading up to our, going on this new journey, and probably the first 18 months of that journey. And they really are, the subtitle of it is, many random thoughts from the road. And that is literally what it is, whether it was something that, someone we met, a place that we went, seeing a sunset on the beach or something like that I would write about and put it in the book. So it just made a lot of sense, to use that title for the podcast and this next series of books that's coming out.
wow. Do you think that you'll ever put some of your mother's experiences in a book that you read in her journals?
It's possible. We somewhere along the line, one of our siblings misplaced that journal, so we don't have the journal physically anymore. So it'd have to be stuff, from memory.
Yeah.
In fact, I just did a blog post yesterday, with it being the anniversary of 9/11 and that she had volunteered at Ground Zero, talking about we went up to see her on Mother's Day of 2002 at Ground Zero when she was volunteering for the Salvation Army, and just that experience of being with her and seeing the people that she interacted with and was volunteering with, and meeting the different rescue workers, firefighters, and police officers and stuff like that, was an incredibly special experience for us, and it's something I'll never forget.
Wow.
And every year, on September 11th, that memory just comes back very clear all the time.
Wow. Well, you also have other books. What are your other books? And those came before The Journey of Your Mother's Son, right?
Yeah. So the Beauty of a Diamond Through the Eyes of a Coach, it was first published in 2012, and then I did add 10 chapters to it, and it was republished in 2021. And that really talks about my years coaching, and the last 10 chapters that I added were really talking about leading up to our journey, some of the things that, it was really kind of written in real time. I was going through this process of,
Wow.
starting a new chapter and leaving the organization and moving forward. But it, like I said before, the philosophy behind my coaching was always, first and foremost, making these kids understand that they're human beings first, and baseball and softball players second. So it was always about teaching life lessons more so. We were very successful on the field, but we were never a win at all costs philosophy. That was not part of what we did. Like I said, we competed to win every time we stepped on the field, but we were not going to injure a kid or be reckless about it just to pick up a tournament trophy at the end of a weekend or something like that. So that's really what that book talks about, is really just understanding how important it is to really have a full perspective of what you're doing when you're coaching kids.
Wow. Sounds wonderful. And you do speaking while you're traveling around in the RV. How does that work and what do you speak about? Do you speak to youth organizations or how does that exactly work?
Yeah, so it's a combination. Definitely love being able to go back and speak to other youth sports organizations and other coaches, and hoping to instill a philosophy of teaching life lessons through the game in them. And then the other kind of topic, so to speak, is again just having the guts to make a what might sound like an unorthodox decision, by changing quote unquote careers long into a career.
Mhm.
And again, I guess that's something that I learned from my mom as well, because like I had mentioned, she had went back to school in her late 40s, early 50s to become a drug and alcohol counselor, and made an incredible impact in that second career of hers, um, with what she did with people. So that's kind of the second topic. um, and really I tell people, as long as you have a spot where I can park the RV, we can get there to speak. So um, welcome those opportunities, and looking forward to being able to have more of them as we kind of travel throughout here.
Oh, that's awesome. So how can people connect with you or reach out to you if they wanted to have you come and speak? How would they go about doing that?
All that information is on my website, and it's I have two URLs, either danclouser.com or journeyofmymotherson.com, that go to the same site. Sometimes people don't want to type in all the journeyofmymotherson.com in there, so I keep it easy, and they can get to danclouser.com as well. But yeah, information there. All my blogs are there, links to my books, links to information about speaking, and then links to all my podcasts are on there as well.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Is there anything that you would like to add to our listeners before we tie this up?
No, I think we covered a lot. I guess if there's just one last thing, it's don't be afraid to make a change, and don't ever think that it's too late to make a change.
Amen. Well, thank you for joining us today, Dan. I appreciate you sharing your story and the story of your mother as well. It's very inspirational. Thank you for our listeners for tuning in, and connect with Dan Clouser, is DANCLOUSER.com, and grab a copy of his book and have him come speak to your organization, your church, your group, whatever it is, whatever serves you, so that he can help build up this. Life skills is so important for our young people today. So till next time, I love you.